With a historic card in the books, UFC 261 really delivered. What a crazy night of fights. And joining us here today is a lady that put in quite a bit of work today during the event with the quick hits interviews, a lot of great content there. But we don't want to just have her on for some quick hits. We got to get into this card with you. Of course, I'm talking about Laura Sanko. Welcome back to Submission Radio. It has been way too long, and we're super excited to get through this card with you.
Thank you guys so much for having me on. Man, it has been too long, and what a card to come back to be on the show again. So much to talk about, and I was reflecting on the shuttle ride back from the venue. This has got to be hands down the craziest fight card I've ever been involved in. Just from start to finish. The fights, the other stuff that was happening in the crowd, and we can get to all of it, but just amazing stuff.
Yeah, I know. We saw crazy finishes. We saw unfortunate finishes. We saw DC and Jake Paul going at it. There's a lot to talk about, but let's not bury the lead. Actually, Dennis, you were going to say something. You want to jump in?
Oh, yeah, just quickly. I was going to say, and you were doing the quick hit stuff as well, which was pretty cool. We got to see you sort of chat to a bunch of really cool people during the event. And I was going to mention, you mentioned how it was a crazy night. How was that experience for you, being able to sort of jump in there and have a little bit of time with some of the big names throughout the night?
It's the best. We've been doing the quick hits throughout, the pandemic. We had to completely change how we did them. And honestly, the whole point of the quick hits to begin with, when we launched this project, was to give people a real feel of what it's like to be backstage at these huge fight nights, or these huge pay-per-view cards, I should say. And that completely went away with the pandemic, because then we had to do everything over Zoom type format, and it was just awful. So tonight, I finally got to stand next to people and, react to them and have them react to me. And it just makes for such a better experience. And it's a long form interview. So like on ESPN, when we do those and when Megan does them, we have usually a maximum of 2 minutes, which really ends up being about 3 questions. So with the stuff I do, I can have an 8-minute interview or a 2-minute interview. And like, I got to the bottom of Randy Rude Boy Brown's beef with Alex Oliveira, finally. I was able to pressure him into that. So that's what makes this the quick hit special. And yeah, it was a lot of fun to be able to have those one-on-one in-person interactions again in an interview. It was nice.
Yeah, it adds a lot to the whole overall experience of watching the pay-per-view. So phenomenal job, Laura. Our hats off to you. But man, let's talk about this main event. I think going into this, a lot of people, and this was kind of the narrative, like this is for money. Usman picked Masvidal because it's a money matchup. It's probably going to go, the same. And man, did Usman deliver. He did a really, really tough task in absolutely topping himself from the last fight. There's a lot of takeaways here. There's the massive, massive improvements that he's made with Trevor Wittman. There's being only the second man to ever stop Masvidal with strikes. There's just the legacy that he's putting on and so creating with his title reign. What was your biggest takeaway from this fight, Laura?
I think that is my biggest takeaway. I expected to see a better Kamaru Usman, as I expected to see a better Jorge Masvidal. I think we all had anticipation that this was going to be a great fight. But to watch him go out there and dissect Masvidal on the feet, and I'll be honest with you, Usman, one of his best weapons is the jab, and we saw that in the Gilbert Burns fight. It's very late here, guys. I'm so sorry. Jorge is one of the best at that range of fighting, that Muay Thai range, and he's so good at parrying the jabs. I thought, man, he's going to take away, one of Kamaru's best weapons, and Jorge's got a lot of tricky ways that he enters the pocket. All of that went out the door. Not only does he have a powerful jab, he's got a powerful right hand. He can move in and out of the pocket when he needs to. He can see things coming, and I don't know, you just got the sense, and I got the sense talking to him after the fight, that it was a very satisfactory performance, because I think that's what this fight was about. He was dissatisfied with the way that he performed in their last fight. And to see someone not be satisfied with a dominant win like that, it was a dominant fight the first time, but he said, no, I'm going to do it again, and I'm going to do it perfectly. And I don't know that you could get a more perfect performance from a guy that we have often picked apart his striking, right? Especially early in his career. I remember I'm not able to tell you what year it was, but when Kamaru Usman said the whole 30% thing, I covered that fight, and he came to me for an interview, and we talked about it a little bit there. But I remember that being kind of a thing that stuck to him for a while, right? Like that he only gives 30% of effort. And that really was never what he meant when he made that comment. He was actually referring to, like, he had some injuries coming into the fight, so he was only at 30%. But it was still something that, like, stuck to him for a long time. And he worked and worked and worked to undo that comment, as crazy as that sounds, and then worked his way up to the RDA fight. And I feel like after the RDA fight, from then on, we've seen a surgence of Kamaru Usman. He gets better and better. And the other thing we always used to say, well, he doesn't finish people. Well, he's finishing people now.
Yeah. I think there's this massive notion that from the fans that, like, he's kind of a boring fighter. And, like, you see him, especially in the last two fights, like, he's just flatlining people or flatlining Jorge Masvidal. I think if anybody, you know, even was creative enough to envision Usman stopping him via strikes, it would be some kind of, like, TKO, maybe late rounds hurting Masvidal. But to just destroy him that way was unbelievable. He's this complete fighter. You know, we knew he always had the wrestling, the athletic ability, and now he's a massive threat on the feet. But I wanted to ask you, like, the narrative here was that the more time and more preparation would benefit Masvidal. Do you feel like, in a way, it actually benefited Usman more because he got more time with Trevor Wittman? He actually got to study Masvidal, whereas in the first fight, Masvidal was kind of always, you know, you got to think he knew that he'd be facing Usman at some point. I almost feel like the time preparation benefited Usman here more than anything.
I completely agree with you, and I think that I think Trevor Wittman is the key word there. You know, Kamaru Usman had the type of game that could beat Jorge Masvidal the first time and on short notice, but it wasn't going to be perfect. It was going to be a little bit clunky because, just like, you know, the narrative was always, well, Jorge only had 6 days to prepare. Well, so did Kamaru, you know, and while the weight cut was only on, you know, the Jorge Masvidal side of things, to have an opponent switch up, to go from Gilbert Burns to Jorge Masvidal, that's a massive change. So I don't think enough credit was given Kamaru Usman for the type of performance that he had. But I agree with you. The longer camp allowed him to spend more time at Trevor Wittman's. And, you know, for people who maybe aren't familiar with the difference between those two camps. So coming from where he was in Florida, Sanford MMA, you know, Henry Hooft, Dutch style kickboxing. It's a lot of, I don't want to say simple combinations because they're executed flawlessly, but it's a lot of power shots, hook, you know, low kick. It's a lot of really powerful combinations that often end in a kick and you're switching side to side. Trevor Wittman injected a level of sophistication to Kamaru Usman's footwork, and certainly to the jab that we have seen, that only complemented the years and years and years of work that Henry Hooft had put into Kamaru Usman before. So it's certainly not saying, well, Henry didn't do enough, you know, a good enough job. Henry did a phenomenal job of building Kamaru Usman up to this monster that he was, and it's like Trevor Wittman came in and sprinkled in this magic that we are seeing now. And oh man, the future is just it's like Khabib, but Khabib is a really devastating striker. I mean, think about that. Like, yeah, you're starting to see no path to victory for anybody that faces him, and that's a scary proposition. It's hard to talk about fights like that, honestly, from an analyst perspective. It's like you start not making up, but like, well, I guess it could go this way. But really what you want to say is he's going to win. Like, that's how it feels, right?
Yeah, and it's interesting because sometimes, well, most of the times, this would usually happen to a fighter before he gets his title shot, when he becomes a contender, goes number one, and then uses that skill set to win the title. Whereas Usman won the title with his wrestling skill set and what he had previously. It's crazy to actually see a champion improve so much on a fight-by-fight basis where you're like, well, he got the job done with his previous skill set. Who can beat Usman 2.0? And I love the fact that you gave Henry Hooft that credit because, yeah, the shots that he throws and the power definitely comes from his training with Henry. But I feel like Trevor Wittman sprinkled that flow in on Kamaru Usman's game, where every time he fights now, things are less telegraphed. Even that jab is less telegraphed. It flies out quicker. And even though there were a couple of moments in that fight with Jorge where you saw sort of take a little bit of a step back in his technique, You saw him primarily have that flow in this fight, which was able to deliver that beautiful right hand. And, well, what a right hand that was. I want to talk about Jorge Masvidal, though, Laura, because this is a guy that's had an incredible career in combat sports. What does this loss mean for him now, in your opinion? Are we looking at a guy who's perhaps his peak was that Nate Diaz fight, or do you believe there is still a lot more to be said and done for Jorge Masvidal in the division?
I certainly think there's still a lot more to be said and done for Jorge Masvidal in that division. And I think more importantly, there is so much more to be said and done as Jorge Masvidal, the person. And I know that sounds kind of like, woo-woo shishi to say, but like he has done a phenomenal job of building himself into a superstar, and to do it that late in his career, his rather inglorious career, I might add. I mean, to do that late in his career, he's being so incredibly smart with the business moves that he is making while he is enjoying this aura of who he is. And it's not unlike Conor, honestly. Conor's aura faded a little bit as he's taken losses, but it's still Conor. Everyone is still going to tune in to watch Conor McGregor fight. We're doing it again, here in a few short months. So in terms of what is next for Jorge Masvidal, in the division in fighting, I think there are some good options. I think that, certainly you have the rematch with Nate. That's an excellent option. I think, whoever wins in the Leon Nate fight, that's got to be an option. And I don't hate, the idea of a Conor fight. I think that Jorge has put himself in an echelon where he's fortunate that he can take a loss, maybe even another loss, and still be a big enough draw where other people in the division are going to want to fight him. They're going to start to think he's an easier fight, maybe if he continues to, have a couple of tough outs. But the biggest thing is that he has made himself a star, and no one can take that away from him, not even a devastating knockout like that, which I know it's going to be tough for him to look at and see, for the next, I was going to say a few months, but, for forever, that's going to always come up. And that's the tough thing about these fights being, they live forever. Ben Askren knows that.
It's crazy in fighting. And we saw that even with Chris Weidman, the throwback to what happened with Anderson Silva. And then we saw this crazy thing that happened with Chris Weidman, Masvidal with Ben Askren, now Masvidal with Kamaru Usman. Fighting is just such a tough thing where you're on top one day and you can be down the bottom the next. And it's just such a roller coaster ride. It just shows what real warriors and true sort of hard it takes to be a top level fighter. I just want to go back to Kamaru Usman for a sec. I know Dana White mentioned Colby Covington would be next for him. What's your reaction to that? I mean, a lot of people are really excited to see what a second fight would look like between the two. The first one, fairly competitive, although we have seen some real improvements from Kamaru Usman since that first Colby Covington fight as well.
I really want to see that fight again because I am dying to see these two wrestle at some point. And you got to believe there's no way they could have, another 25 potential minutes of fighting and not exchange a single takedown. Of course, I say that, and that's probably what's going to happen. But no, I do think I love that rematch because the fight was one of the best fights I've ever seen. It was so competitive. It was so constantly back and forth. You're on a razor's edge the entire time. And it went all the way up until almost the last minutes. And Kamaru was able, to get the win. But I think that Colby has a strong case that he has really, truly challenged Kamaru Usman out there. And again, I can't wait to see if these two decide, okay, let's really mix it up. Let's see who's the better wrestler in the context of an MMA fight. But when I talked to him after the fight, it was pretty cool. He was holding his daughter as he was talking to me. And he said, I have so much time away from my daughter. If you follow him on Instagram, she is just the light of his life. So I think the man deserves however long of a break he wants to take, but knowing the competitor that he is, it probably won't be that long of a break. And I think we're going to see Kamaru versus Colby 2 sooner rather than later. It's going to be incredible.
And Usman was talking about recently how he despite being away from his daughter, he kind of realizes that he's got, a short window to maximize on this opportunity, this career, and he kind of wants to take these fights and just, I guess build the record, make the money. I feel like it's only a matter of time before he's really going to be wanting those massive money fights. If Nate Diaz can beat Leon Edwards, I mean, that's just money in his lap if that fight actually happens. And then the Colby is another example of like a pretty big money fight for Usman given the rivalry. I think also the fact that Usman's striking has improved so much, and in the first fight he was kind of back and forth. Oh man, it's hard not to kind of maybe lean to Usman in the rematch. But I wanted to ask you, just kind of a little bit off topic, a man who was also backstage that you would have seen is Nick Diaz. He looked like he was partying. He looked like he was having a good time. Where do you think Nick Diaz fits, not necessarily into all of this in terms of the title picture, but just in terms of the welterweight division? Apparently Dana White is, I guess, meeting with him literally right now as we speak. What do you think might be next for Nick Diaz?
Oh my gosh, that's a hard question. That's tough to say. I love the idea of him being back, and I didn't see him tonight. I did see him briefly in the hotel the other day, and that guy, man, I forgot how big he is. Like he is jacked right now. He's clearly ready to go. I am excited for the spice that he would add to this division. I'm excited for the return of Khamzat Chimaev. And once we see what shakes out with Leon, I mean, I don't know, Katie bar the door. It's going to be incredible.
Yeah, imagine maybe even a Masvidal Nick Diaz fight there to see what happens next for both men. That could be a big one, but definitely great to see him back. And a surprise that he didn't get in a bit of a altercation with Jake Paul there at the event as well. I know, hey, if Daniel Cormier is getting in there, you'd think Nick Diaz would be right behind him, and then Laura Sanko behind him. So,
okay, so I know I'm turning the tables here and I'm becoming an interviewer, but I was in the middle of doing a bunch of other interviews and I missed the DC Jake Paul interaction, and I still have not seen it. So I need you to describe it to me in depth.
Well, there's a lot of blood. There's a lot of broken limbs, and both men were transported, obviously. No, so DC apparently went and confronted Jake, and then people were saying that Jake kind of put his... Beg your pardon?
He just walked over to him? DC did?
Yeah, because Jake was in the crowd, and then apparently Jake sort of put his hand up, and DC kind of pushed it out of the way. Some people are saying, maybe he hurt his hand. Some people are saying maybe he broke Jake's watch. I'm not 100% sure. I haven't really sat down. I watched it once quickly, didn't exactly analyze tape on it. It all seems like a little bit of fun, to be honest. And DC versus Jake in 2022, obviously. It
looks like a Triller promo, if I'm being honest with you, but we'll see if they edit that at all or just keep the video as it is.
Oh, so a Triller promo. So it was slightly cringy.
Well, I think it'll be cringy. Yeah, I don't know. I think the thing with Jake Paul is, and you know what? I kind of just quickly wanted to mention in the Dana White post-fight press conference, Dana almost gave him a bit of props. Like, hey, you guys are talking about this guy, and this guy's on a little bit of a run. So I think a lot of people are sort of, even though he's not a fighter, I think he's played his cards pretty well. And I think even Dana White's like, hey, DC's coming up and grabbing this guy by the arm. So something's going on for this guy. What happens for him next? Who knows? But I guess Dana, and I wonder, did Dana White actually bet that $1 million, I wonder, on Ben Askren?
I don't think he did. I think, of course, maybe thou doth protest too much. I mean, he was pretty adamant that he did not. So
yeah,
I don't know.
Back alley deals, handshakes, those kinds of things.
I don't know.
By the way, DC, by the way, with nothing to lose. DC, in retirement, he, loves pro wrestling. Why not go up to Jake Paul, have a bit of fun, get his name in the headlines, give Jake Paul the rub, so to speak. He's doing him a favor.
I mean, yeah. And listen, there is nothing, part of this, of course, fighters are self-promoters. They have to be. It's part of the business. So people get that, attention is a good thing these days in general. But there is nothing more galling to real fighters thinks that they can beat you. There's just nothing more irritating. And this sounds ridiculous to say, but like I even get irritated about it when people suggest like, oh, so and so could beat her. And I'm like, no. And I haven't fought 7 years. Like I'm not even a real fighter anymore. And it's still, I don't know what it is, but it's like this immediate like. It makes people really angry. So he's doing a very smart thing by challenging. I mean, he's just shotgunning, comments like, oh, I'd take on this, like he's being smart, and you can't fault him for making a lot of money in a world that that feeds off that stuff. So more power to him.
Yeah, that's right. Props to him. And also, while we're talking about money, if you want to save some money, our good friends at Manscaped have got the deals for you. You've heard us bang on about the Lawnmower 3.0, the best grooming tool on the planet, arguably in the universe. You can shave anything and keep your balls nice and smooth. But also, Manscaped have the refined cologne, the Manscaped signature scent, very light, approachable, and gentlemanly. You'll feel like you're a cross between James Bond and Ric Flair when you're rolling down the street to your next date or potentially meeting. It is calm and inviting. Citrus burst, a woody, masculine finish. It's got a nice bottle. It's hypoallergenic. It's vegan. And the good homies at Manscaped are giving you 20% off with the code SUBMISSION, as they are our official sponsor and a great sponsor at that. Isn't that right, Dennis?
That's right, Cass. Manscaped is the place to go. Get on there and get that discount. And also, if you guys would have checked out the show earlier and signed up to my bookie, you could be making a ton of money right now. And you don't want to miss out. There's a lot of great events still yet to come. So sign up this week with promo code SUBMISSION and take advantage of up to $1,000 bonus on your first deposit. That's at MyBookie. Bet anything, anytime, anywhere with the code word SUBMISSION. Sign up today. And Cass, speaking of our friends, let's talk about the Rich, because these guys have one hell of a wallet. Check out Casper's wallet right there. It holds up to 12 cards plus room for cash, over 30 colors, 40,000 5-star reviews, and each wallet comes with a lifetime warranty. So basically, you can buy one wallet, carry it for life. The Rich team is so confident that you like it, they'll let you test drive it for 45 days, and you can send it back for a full refund if you don't love it. What a deal. And the deal gets better. You can get 10% off today and free worldwide shipping with code word SUBMISSION. Go to theridge.com/submission and use code word SUBMISSION now. Get yourself one of those wallets. You can also get bags, pens, all sorts of really great things from the Ridge. And just quickly, Casper, I just want to send a quick shout out to ethos_pictures for doing an awesome artwork of us, you and me, over at Submission Radio. You guys could follow them at ethos_pictures and DM him for commissions. If you check out his account on Instagram, he has so much great work. And check this out. Here are the boys right here. And it doesn't get any better than that. That's ethos_pictures. Get your commission today.
I like it, man. It's like looking in a mirror. So shout out to Ethos. But having said all that, obviously we're going to talk about Rose Namajunas becoming the first woman ever to regain her UFC title. What an exciting moment. Shades of UFC 217 when she was able to shock the world against Joanna Jędrzejczyk. And I think people kind of had this expectation, Laura, that it was going to be kind of a Joanna Jędrzejczyk, Weili Zhang type fight of the night, maybe back and forth, crazy war. And then for Rose to just, set up that kick, Weili obviously going for the low kicks to try and limit Rose's movement. And then for Rose to just, finish her just so quickly in the first round. What did you make of the way she was able to do that? And such an amazing performance.
It was incredible. And, she surprised me yet again. I'll be the first to admit that, when she fought Joanna, I thought Joanna was going to piece her up pretty good. And I'll be honest here, I saw Weili, I didn't think she was going to piece her up, but I saw Weili pulling away toward the end, and I thought maybe her power and physicality would be too much. I knew Rose would have the better footwork and angles and whatnot, but I just expected the power to be coming from the side of Weili Zhang, and couldn't have been more mistaken. I think she said that she made that read in the moment, and that's what makes it so incredible. And I don't know if you saw in the footage, but you can tell Weili read it as a leg kick because she sort of like tucked her hips back, like she was trying to scoot out of the way of either a low leg kick or some sort of calf kick. And then Rose brought it up. And I mean, we saw what happened after that. To see her, to see her be able to go out and do that a second time, to take on these women that in their moment feel invincible. And what I love about the sport, and what I love about Rose, and what I love about women's MMA in particular, is that you can have someone like Rose Namajunas with a 10-4 record, go out there and be the best in the world. You can have someone like Amanda Nunes, who lost in Invicta to Sarah D'Alelio, later go on and become the greatest female fighter of all time. And I think it speaks to the fact that early on, women sort of took whatever fight they could take. There was not a lot of strategy. It was just like, I want to fight. I want to do this because I love it. And then it wasn't until the UFC came along and these women profession to strive for that we're seeing the greatness, emerge from these athletes, the greatness that was always there, but that they didn't have like a destination for, if that makes any sense. So I remember watching Rose in Invicta, and she was excellent then, but I would not have said, oh, that's going to be, one of the greatest strawweights of all time. She was good, but she didn't ooze greatness. And when I was interviewing her tonight, she said that too. She's like, oh my gosh, we're both here, we're in different roles, but we're both Invicta. And like, I love it when good things happen to good people. And she just strikes me as a very genuine, good person. And I love that she's open about the psychological struggles she's had and the mental hurdles. And it can be a real inspiration for people. And it's an inspiration to me. And I'm just so happy for it. And I know that was like the longest, most rambling answer in the world, but it's 2:00 in the morning.
That was great.
Or whatever.
2:00 in the morning, Laura Sanko is our favorite Laura Sanko. And by the way, it was like a scene out of a movie. Joe Rogan was brought to tears. It was just great to see that moment. And I think fans kind of watch the UFC. They obviously watch it for the knockouts and the blood and the gore and all the cool techniques and the cool fighters and stuff. But you also watch it for the moments of being like, hey, like I watched that moment live, and this isn't a movie. This is real life. And this athlete here really made history. And by the way, that kick, that's a great kick. And I feel like people need to go back, look at Taekwondo and look at the advantages that you can bring in with Taekwondo kicks, because the thing is, no matter what kind of kick you throw, a kick is so much more powerful than a punch. And if you can land a quick kick like that, man, you could put anybody out. And she really showed that with that Weili knockout. She was talking about how she worked on her dexterity and how she has really long leg reach. And it's just fascinating to see all the research and the science that she puts in behind her techniques. I think a lot of people can really learn from that. But let's talk about what's next for her, because Dana White seems like he's keen on the rematch. What do you think is next for her? Do you think maybe somebody else in the division makes sense, or do you give that immediate rematch straight away, maybe in another instant classic?
I think you have to do the rematch. I think anytime you have a fight where there's all this built up expectation, and I think a lot of that expectation does come from Weili's previous performance against Joanna Jędrzejczyk. You have this like pent up, it sounds terrible, but it's like pent up, we need to see some violence. People need to see more of this. And so yeah, I think the rematch is the natural thing. And I think I'm going to be fascinated to see if Zhang Weili sticks to her feeling that was an early stoppage when she has the opportunity to go back and look at it. I think in the moment you could tell she was protesting it so hard. She's a competitor. She wanted to a little bit of a language barrier there, obviously, but it sounded like she said, I was still conscious. I could have continued, never mind that, this devastating strike had just been landed. That speaks to her mentality. So I would love to see these two compete again, but more than anything, I would love to see Rose get to enjoy being a champion in the way that she wants to be a champion for once, and soak that in and enjoy the fruits of her labor.
Yeah, I think you make a lot of good points. It'd be interesting to see whether they do that one quickly or not. Obviously, Rose seems like she's ready to go pretty quickly, but there's some things that she wants to do as well. And then obviously with Weili, you got to think she's got to recover, because when she was on the ground, you could see she did go limp and she wasn't defending herself. It was a very, very good stoppage. I'm glad it got stopped when it did. And then you've also got Carla Esparza versus Zhang and Yan as well, so they could always be ready to fight the winner. But yeah, once Dana says he likes the idea of a rematch, I think that's what happens. Speaking of rematches, just to stick over to obviously Valentina Shevchenko's just brutal victory over Jessica Andrade. How do you feel about this Amanda Nunes rematch? Do you feel like it's time? This seemed to be all the talk at the post-fight presser, even leading into the fight. Dana's not so sold though, but when you look at women's flyweight, there's just not, I know Lauren Murphy's obviously putting together a nice streak as well, but there's just not a lot of contenders at the moment.
I'm thinking really hard here, because I'm thinking what I really want in terms of a fan and not just in terms of what makes sense business wise, I guess. I think part of me really wants to know at some point. I don't know that it's next, but at some point, I do want to know who's the greatest women's fighter of all time. Right now, it's definitely Amanda Nunes. But tonight, Valentina Shevchenko made a big leap forward. And I'm telling you, guys, I feel like it's 1A, 1B. The distance between those two is very, very small. And so you want to see them fight again. But at the same time, they're not in the same weight class. Amanda is always going to be the far bigger fighter. And so if they go out there again and Amanda wins, does that necessarily prove that I don't know. I guess I feel like most people would say, well, obviously it does prove that but I don't know. I just think the weight disparity and the size disparity is a little bit too much to say that those two are apples to apples. I think that Valentina really wants to reign over the flyweight division and continue to sort of flick these little flies that come buzzing and annoying her, because that's what it feels like. It literally feels like she is just going out there irritated that someone would have the audacity to think that they could even sniff her gloves.
How dare they?
There's people on OnlyFans that would pay for that, Laura.
Oh, we could go down that rabbit hole for sure.
Yeah.
Oh, how much would they pay to sniff Valentina's glove? A lot.
Can we be surprised?
Not our underwear, Laura. It's like it's gone into minus territory. We owe them money. Unbelievable.
Exactly. But the point being, she is so superlative in every facet. And, again, I'm one of them. On the weigh-in show, we have these discussions of how we think the fight's going to go. And to have an interesting discussion, you have to make arguments on both sides of the coin, even if in the back of your mind, like, Valentina's probably going to win this. But you start thinking, powerful against Caitlin Chookagian. I mean, she brings the wrestling. We saw what Jennifer Maia was able to do in a few moments. Maybe, she could do more. And it's like Valentina just goes out there and sort of like scoffs, as she's doing these things. Like, oh, you thought I couldn't take you down. Let me do it 7 times in 1.5 rounds and set the record, and she just makes it look simplistic.
The other events of the night, obviously, very sad to see what happened with Chris Weidman and also Jimmy Crute, someone who's, really establishing himself as a big star from down here, trains in Melbourne with Dan Kelly and a great team over at Footscray, and was unfortunately, even though he put on a great performance, unfortunately had the situation with Anthony landing that beautiful kick to his leg and getting the fight stopped there. I'd just love to get your thoughts on those two fights, Laura. What was your reaction? And I guess it's two guys at opposite ends of the spectrum. Chris Weidman, a little bit older, a lot of people thinking, well, will he be able to return after something like this? Jimmy Crute, only 25 years young and already showing so much maturity and experience in that octagon.
Yeah, absolutely. I think just to address the Chris Weidman situation first, you work around this game long enough, you kind of become numb to violence. Blood is not anything that phases you, and people getting knocked out becomes the norm. And I think it takes something as jarring as what we saw happen to Chris Weidman to kind of remind us all what's at stake for these people every single time they step foot inside the octagon. Those injuries are rare, but to be honest with you, I'm surprised that they don't happen more often because of, how hard people are kicking. What happened was he kicked, the thickest part right below the knee and Uriah Hall checked it perfectly. And it's hard to say whether maybe Chris had a hairline fracture that he may not even know he had, but you can speculate to all that you want. The point is, these are the types of things that can happen in any fight. And we forget about that. We become numb to it. And I feel like it I don't want to say good, but things like this, when things like this happen, it's important, I think, for all of us to sit back and kind of recalibrate our ability to just like, that person's nose just got put on the side of their face, no big deal. You know, we have to remind ourselves what's at stake.
Yeah, there's a real price that goes into being a professional fighter, and I think a lot of people fall into the trap of being like, he's got a broken nose, but he'll be back in like 6 months and fight again. But when you're actually in the emergency room, like many of us have been with these injuries, like from sparring someone or doing this or that, then they're going, I don't know, if when we do the surgery, you might not be able to use your arm for this. We don't know what's going to happen. You go, this is a lot more serious, man, than just being away for 6 months. I got to get through. I don't think people realize the work to come back from. Like an injury like that Chris experiences, a normal person can sometimes never come back from that.
Yeah. It reminds me a lot of, from Kansas City, and Alex Smith used to be our quarterback. And I don't know if you've followed his story at all, but he had an injury, a break that got an infection and ended up losing a huge chunk of his leg, was a quarterback in the NFL and is still today. And point being, the journey that he had to go through from the day that he broke his leg to when he was finally able to play football again was just, it was insane. And I hope that Chris's journey is nothing like that. And I hope that Chris is able to heal up as soon as possible. But the great thing is that Chris Wiedman has a legacy that no matter what happens from here on out, a legacy that can't be taken away. You know, he is the guy that went out there and beat Anderson Silva, not once, but twice. And it's so, you alluded to it earlier, it's just so, I don't even know the right word for it, crazy that is what happened to him. And that is what happened to Anderson. That part of it kind of like, it blows my mind. I was talking to one of the coaches about it, just the odds of something like that happening to Chris and Anderson is just, it's crazy to think about. And I hope he heals up real quick. And more than anything, I just hope he's
100%. I think also the fact that Chris was so classy about the Anderson thing, like he never really said anything out of line. It's good because now it's not going to come back to like bite him in the ass. And there was this sense of Chris is such a like nice guy. People kind of wanted to see him like, can he become the next, maybe not necessarily champion, but can he rise the ranks again? And for this to happen, it was just it was such a bummer. But I guess to sort of end on a good note, the silver lining is Jimmy Crute, sort of on the other opposite spectrum, so young in his career, 25, this is lost. We already saw similar situation with Sean O'Malley, and now look at Sean O'Malley. And I think there's no reason why a similar situation can't happen with Jimmy Crute as well.
Yeah, and I'd love to see that fight with Johnny Walker being booked as well. I reckon that's a firefight right there. That would be a hell of a fight if Jimmy can come around and Johnny's available.
That would be an absolute banger. And I know that Jimmy Crute will be back. Hopefully there's no knee injury there. Hopefully it was just, the drop foot with the nerve, being kicked there. But to go in against Anthony Smith, that's a real test. And Jimmy Crute is an absolute unit, as you all.
He's a unit.
One of my
mad dog
words. Yeah, but listen, Anthony Smith was impressive tonight too. I think a lot of people see him as being, maybe past his best days sometimes, and it's fun to see him go back out there and like you said on the microphone, 51 fights in, and I'm still learning. I'm still getting better. So I'm excited to see Jimmy heal up, get back in there. He's going to have great things happen, and I'm happy to see Anthony back on the road to success as well.
Yeah, both Anthony Smith and Uriah Hall handling the situations unbelievably well. And Uriah Hall, I think he just made a ton of new fans. There's a lot of people obviously love him, but I think he made a ton of new fans of the way that he handled that situation with Chris. It was absolutely fantastic, and can't wait to see what's next for him next. But guys, make sure to follow Laura on social media at Laura_Sanko on Twitter and Instagram. Laura, just quickly, what's coming up next? What can people follow you on next? Any fun projects or anything that all the Laura Sanko Nights can follow? Is that the word for it? Sanko Nights?
I don't know. You just made it up. I like it. The Sanko Files.
Yes.
Back to the OnlyFans we go.
The best is definitely Instagram at Laura_Sanko. I've got a lot going on. I'm working the fights next weekend. So that's 3 weekends in a row for me. I'm a little tired, to be honest with you, definitely tired at the moment. And then after that, of course, later this summer, Contender Series is going to kick up again. So a lot on my plate.
Don't you have a podcast? Weren't you doing the podcast as well, or have you sort of put that on? What's going on? People want to hear from you.
Which one?
Yeah, exactly. Which one? That's the question.
You're like the Ben Askren of media commentators. You got like 25 podcasts. Are there a couple that people could look out for? Or?
Well, no, the podcast thing is kind of on hold because I listen, Kevin, Anthony, God bless him, can be a little unreliable in terms of like getting back, scheduling, that type of thing. I thought, okay, Kevin, not that we quit doing it. We still want to do it. We're just going to do it whenever it works. So it's like a semi-annual podcast. Kevin, on the other hand, I thought, okay, this is like the consummate professional. We're going to get this going. Same thing, scheduling difficulties, whatnot. It'll happen when it happens. I've given up. Like I apparently not meant for the podcasting world, but one day I want to ask this of you guys. One day I would like to come on your show, not at 2:00 in the morning, because you'll be amazed at how insightful I could be when I'm not completely tired.
You'll be like the Kamaru Usman of like podcast guests. Like if you're already good as it is, what about with a full camp? What about not at 2 a.m.? So we look forward to that. You're welcome anytime. You don't need your own podcast, Laura. You've always got Submission Radio. Happy to have you on anytime.
Yeah, we'll change it to Sanko Radio, and yeah, should be good. Sanko Nights could join us.